I don't have time for that. Oh, well. Thunder and Lightning here on SuperTalk Mississippi, and pleased to be joined now by Coach Matt Brock, the new defensive coordinator at Mississippi State. A lot of change on the other side of the ball out there for spring practice, Coach. Not so much on your side, though, but do this for us. Tell us something on the field, football-wise, that's different between you and Coach Arnett.
That's a good question. I don't know if there's a whole lot of differences. I think we kind of have a similar approach when it comes to the game of football and everything we do and what we believe in. And I think that's probably why it's been a natural transition. I probably where he played or he coached in the back end a little bit. Last year with the safeties, he probably likes to tinker with coverage a little bit more. And where I'm more of a front-oriented guy, I probably like to tinker with the front a little bit more from a schematic standpoint. But overall, I think there's a lot of similarities.
He said when we talked to him on Saturday that having you would probably alleviate some concerns of him doing some dumb things like he did last year. He said he was maybe a little too aggressive at times. But what I know of you says you're a pretty aggressive defensive coach as well. I assume Mississippi State will not be blitzing less in 2023.
I don't think I would prescribe that for sure. I think it comes down to that's the style of defense we're going to play. That's the players we have. They understand the system. They understand the expectation, and it's been successful for quite a while here. And so it would be kind of foolish of me to come in there and completely change our philosophy.
So you've got, you mentioned the defensive side of the ball, the defensive front. You've got some experience there. You brought back some guys coming back for their final year. The secondary, the back end, maybe a little bit more of the new faces. This spring, what do you want to accomplish? If I said you had to set some goals, what would they be?
Well, I think number one in spring, you've got to find out what your guys do well. And they have to have a good enough understanding of what we're asking them to do. So schematically, so that their physical tools actually show, and so that from a coaching staff standpoint, we can make proper evaluations and determine who can help us and who cannot help us. And so that's the first thing you got to be careful of is making sure you're not overloading them mentally, where it slows them down and they're thinking too much. So that would be goal number one, which really leads you into this goal number two, which is determining what's best 11 players to get on the field, and then from there, where's the next guy at each position that can make you successful in the fall, and so on and so forth as you build your roster and determine who can help you be successful. So I think those are the two key goals throughout the development of spring football.
If you ask someone like me, someone in the media, who were the leaders defensively last year, obviously Emmanuel Forbes would have been listed, but he's on to the NFL now. But then Jet Johnson, Buki Watson, Jaden Crumedy, those are guys that I probably would have picked out. You have them all back. I know what they can do for you on the field. You're talking about two of the top tacklers in the SEC returning, the top two tacklers in the SEC. I know what difference Crumedy made when he was available later in the season. Off the field, what did those guys give you that you're glad to have back this year?
Right. It's funny you asked that question. We had a defensive unit meeting today, and that was a little bit of the topic. And I think, simply put, guys like that who have been in the trenches, been through games, been hardened by the process of playing SEC football, they can give young guys, the perspective of pushing through some adversity, pushing through the growing pains of, you come in highly recruited or whatever it may be, you were the guy at your high school, and now all of a sudden you show up and you got to essentially rebuild from square one, so they can kind of give those guys that perspective. And then the other thing is just, you talk about leadership, guys lead in different ways, but ultimately leadership on and off the field elevates people around them, and that's what we're asking those guys to do on a daily basis, whether it's vocally or whether it's just how they play, because everybody has a little different style. But that's the key to having those returners is they can't just worry about their own execution. They need to elevate guys around them.
The last 2 years, the transfer portal for Mississippi State, the secondary has been where I feel like you've had the most success. You've been able to bring in guys at those positions, the safeties, your cornerbacks, that have been impact players for you, guys like Jalen Green, guys like Jackie Matthews. And this year, no different. A bunch of new faces back there via the transfer portal. Early in the process of spring practice, but how do you feel the new faces are adapting for you back there?
I think they're doing a good job, and there's still a long, long ways to go. We're 6 practices in the spring, and there's tremendous amount of growth that needs to show up as we push through the rest of spring and throughout the summer process and fall camp for us to play winning football with those guys. But it comes down to repetition, and kind of what I mentioned early on is getting those growing pains out of the way early, so now they're not thinking as much, and they can go out and show their skill set physically. And there's been times where maybe we're not executing things to the point we want them, but you see flashes of the physical capabilities of those guys back there and how they can help us, and we're going to need them to be able to do that.
And, of course, you've also got a new face back there coaching those guys, and Brett Dewhurst, a guy that you guys elevated from the analyst position and turned him into a full-time assistant. What about him as a young coach made you want to make sure he was part of this staff?
Well, Brett and I have a history going way back. We were together. We knew each other when I was back at Texas Tech in 2013, 2014, and then we started working together in 2015 there, and have always stayed in contact. And then he worked with us last year here and was heavily involved in the role that he could be involved in. And so he was a guy that was familiar with the system, understood our players, understood how we want to play defense here. And so really it was a pretty natural fit. Number one, I know him, I trust him. Number two, he understands the scheme and understood our roster and our needs and those types of things. So really it was pretty much a no-brainer when it came to that situation.
And then you have a veteran coach like David Turner, who's been at Mississippi State before, who's been around the SEC, and whose resume is kind of unmatched. If you had to put, salary of players coached as a stat, his would be pretty high. What does he bring to this coaching staff for you?
Well, it's simply put, right? I mean, you mentioned it just a second ago, the development that he has created within his resume of players in this league, from this state, at this school. I mean, just at this school alone, right, is incredible. The second thing that I would throw out there is, I think it's like 22 years in the SEC or 21 years in the SEC, something like that. And before this year, when we talked to him, I told him, I made kind of a joke. I said, shoot, most guys, if you make half of that in the SEC, that's a pretty good run. And so really just all the things he's been around seeing, really more from a development standpoint fundamentally. Very excited to have him here with us. Smart guy, great motivator. Just everything about him has fit in well, and our players, I can see I see them adapting to his style and really doing a nice job.
Only got a couple minutes left with you. This is Coach Matt Brock here, Mississippi State defensive coordinator, joining us tonight. And this next question, I apologize in advance if it's a tough question to answer, because it might make you a little emotional. But what's it been like with not having Coach Leach out there this spring? I mean, how is that for you guys? Do you still feel his presence on the practice field?
Oh, I think so, and I think the best way, I've said this before to people when they ask me, I think the best way you honor a guy like Coach Leach is you go out there and work your tail off every single day, players and coaches, and you uphold some of the same standards that he's always preached too. Playing the next play, being mentally tough, playing hard. I mean, you look at the teams that he's had throughout his career; those are all staples of him, and any good football team has those things. It makes up a big part of who they are and their DNA. And Coach Arnett's no different with his belief. We might be different systematically as far as offensively and those types of things, but ultimately the pillars that build a program, the toughness, the work ethic, the discipline, playing the next play, all these different messages and things that have been a part of our program for 3 years with Coach Leach, they might be said a different way or executed a different way, but they're still at the core of who the program is. So by all means, it has been different, but there's still a lot of similarities in the beliefs that we carry on.
Last question for you, Coach, and we only got about a minute left. Does it seem like Coach Arnett's a little happier now that he's the head coach? He's smiling a little bit more. He's joking a little bit more with us at practice. Have you seen a change in this guy? Well, who is this person?
Him on this deal. It just depends who's playing better, right? He just walks over that side and feels good, So he's joking about it all the time. But And when you get to be the head coach, you just if the offense is having a good day, you slide over to that sideline. If the defense is having a good day, you slide to that sideline. So maybe that's why he's having so much fun. I don't know, but now jokes aside, I mean I think it just he's natural transition to it, and somebody asked me that early on. He's been essentially the head coach of the defense to this point, with Coach Leach, and so. It really just made that natural transition to the head coach overseeing both sides of the ball at this point.
Coach, I really appreciate your time tonight. Great stuff. Looking forward to talking to you again very soon as the spring progresses. Coach Matt Brock joining us here on Thunder and Lightning. We'll be right back.